Hey everybody, it's Andy Kushner, host of the Wedding Biz, brought to you by Party Slate. And this is another episode of The Next Level, in which my guest co-host and I discuss the most recent interview of the week, who I consider to be an icon or representing the next generation of icons of the weddings and event industry. And together we talk about a few highlights of the interview and help translate them in ways that you can use to bring your own business to the next level. And before I introduce today's guest co-host, I want to mention last week's interview, if you missed it, which was Calder Clark out of Charleston, South Carolina, and also Raleigh, North Carolina. She is a wonderful planner and designer. It was a really fun conversation. So if you missed it, be sure to check it out. And now, without further ado, today's guest co-host, someone who was on the show back on September 18th of 2017, destination planner Valerie Gernhauser of Sapphire Events. Welcome, Valerie.
Hi, Andy. Thank you so much for having me again. It's always a pleasure to join you on your wonderful podcast.
Yeah, thanks. I love having you on again. And again, I want to point out to everyone, I actually interviewed you, Valerie, in New Orleans. I was very lucky to be there. Great time, great place. And again, that was September 18th of 2017. I'll also have a link in the show notes so you can listen to. It was a really great interview of Valerie. So I want you to be sure to check it out. She is also a speaker, and she created her Sapphire Session Speaking Tour, a specialized program for wedding planners and event designers. I want to mention who this week's guest is, who we're going to talk about, and that was Meryl Snow of Snowstorm Solutions, who I first interviewed and then released on July 1st. And I felt there was so much more to cover for a dynamic part 2. So that's what this one is all about. And Meryl is quite well known in the event, wedding, and catering space. She's the co-founder of Philly-based special event and catering industry Festivities Events, along with its subsidiaries Offshoots Decor and Philadelphia's Picnic Company. She's also a wonderful, wonderful consultant, especially with sales, in training for sales. She's also a speaker, event producer, designer, and has think tank workshops. So, Valerie, the first topic, that I know grabbed both of our attention was how Meryl talked about the need for developing sales strategies and having a structure and accountability and setting goals and prospecting. And I'm thinking, whether or not, we have a team, whether it's ourselves or a team, how critical that is. You agree?
Oh, yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, sales is my favorite part of the job, or maybe one of about 5 parts of the job that I really enjoy a lot. And early on, I think it's so important to have a process and a direction for how every inquiry and potential client call and interview is going to go. So you are prepared for the inevitable questions that are going to come your way, but also the follow through and the follow up and how fast you're getting proposals out and where you go from there when you're onboarding a client that signs up, and then where you go when they decide to go another direction. Every bit of that process is important, and to have something set up in place, I think, is really the key to success, as she had said. So,
are you literally, Valerie, like setting goals? I mean, do you have a number, whether it's parties or revenue you bring in? Do you have that kind of a goal in mind?
Yes. So I think you know this, but we have 2 brands that serve weddings and special events. And my main brand is Sapphire Events. So our goal would be 4 to 6 a year. So we don't do a lot of those because the price point for each client that comes to us under the Sapphire umbrella is really pretty high, but so is our time investment and the workload that we have to do. So I found that anything more than really 4 to 6 really thins us out to where we're not delivering to our clients. But then I have another branch of our company called Ruby and Pearl that just focuses on event management, which is much more of a volume basis. So we sort of target 15 to 20 events a year-ish under the Ruby and Pearl umbrella. And that price point is much lower. There's a significant gap between what a client would pay for Sapphire versus what they would pay for Ruby and Pearl. It's how we've just sort of scaled the business in our market. And so, yeah, in mind, I have a number of events that I would like to make roughly so that I can gauge how much revenue we'll make annually, so I can have, my overhead covered with rent that I pay on an office space downtown, with payroll, the operation systems that we have on a subscription basis, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So the point is, you're obviously giving it a lot of attention and focus. So you're bringing in the right numbers.
Exactly. You have to.
Yeah, there's really no choice. Now, do you have, and then I'm going to come back to some more ideas Meryl had about sales strategies, but do you have people selling for you, or is it just you?
Right now, I have Jack Kane, who's been with me since my business was just under a year old. And for the last 2 years, he has been our head of sales. And so he's taken in all of the inquiries, and I had trained him on how to tell whether a client is good for one brand versus the other, how to pivot during an interview or phone call, and that sort of thing. So he's been doing all of the sales for us for these last 2 years. And again, having that sales process in place on my end has been helpful in training him to understand what it is that he needs to do and say, in any given sales call. So he does that for us, and it's been pretty successful.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about training, because what Meryl said, one of the first things that she talked about with salespeople is role playing. And I know that's a really big deal in my music company, Kushner Entertainment. I know that I have seen people be very hesitant about doing role playing. And, Meryl was pointing out how it is hard for those who are doing it, but it's great for the audience. And then, and after 5 to 10 minutes, the person themselves does warm up to it. And I've seen that for sure. And I remember I used to sell for IBM, and we had to do role playing, and I'd always hate when they would call my name, but it was when it was how I learned the most, was to do role playing. And, she mentioned, and I remember this in my own experience, that she then has the rest of the team, and I guess in your case, it would be you. In my case, it would be me, critique the person, out loud. But the point, I think her main point was that the person who's doing the role playing, it's got to come out of their mouth in order to really be comfortable doing it in real life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Practice makes perfect, and the bottom line is a client is not going to buy whatever it is you're selling if they feel an iota of lack of confidence in your sales pitch.
Yeah, I agree.
So the more you practice that, and the better you have it down, and the more you're prepared for really the questions that come at you about what it is that you do and how you serve a client. Anticipating all of those potential client questions before you are in that interview really helps you formulate your response, so that way you can slide right into an answer and not hem and haw about that response, because any inkling of that on the client's end, it starts a foundation of a lack of trust, and trust is so important in what we do. So it's super important.
Well, I want to come back to that in a second, but also objections. I mean, how to handle objections, right, I think is, and I remember when I was doing the role playing, at the time, my manager would throw in these objections. I mean, it would make me sweat, but I'm so glad I did it, because sure enough, I'd have to face that in real life, and so I learned a lot about that. Now, also, she talked about storytelling, which I loved how she called it storytelling, that that if we tell a story when we're selling, it really grabs the attention of the prospective client. And she gave an example. I believe she said that there was this one couple, and she told a story. People can listen to the interview to hear more detail about it, but it really does grab people, and they can imagine themselves and see it, and then it breaks down the barrier between the salesperson and the client, and now there's a relationship formed. But I love that perspective, the angle of telling a story. What did you think of that?
I loved that, and I thought that was such a great point too. Is I think she also mentioned how, a client might be interviewing several different people. And if all the proposals came back the same, it's really hard for them to tell the difference really as to what it is that they're getting from one person to the next. But then to have one proposal that is extremely different really helps that particular candidate stand apart from the rest. And that storytelling, I think what she was talking about is a big part of that. Is it's not necessarily the innate go-to in the business world of, showing clients that this is what you want to do. And what we do in this business, especially, is that we are storytellers. We are sharing, living legacies for these folks that we really want to ensure their trust in us. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I want to clarify before we move on to another topic. What we're talking about, Valerie and I, in terms of saying storytelling, is to literally say like, hey, I had this one couple and they wanted this kind of floral design and however the venue was this and this. And so what we decided was this is what we ended up doing for them. So it's like giving a picture of what it could be like, and describing, very visually, of course, their own possibilities. Many of our past guests, including Brian Raffanelli, Cece Johnson, Colin Cowie, and Lynn Easton, all use Party Slate to showcase their event work and build their businesses. And if you're not familiar with Party Slate, it's a website that inspires people planning events and connects them with the leading event professionals and venues across the country and the world. This is a really, really great website. You can sign up for a free profile where you can upload unlimited photos and events, or you can explore one of their membership options for even more exposure. And Party Slate has launched in 11 cities so far, including Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, Dallas, and Miami. And they are coming to a city near you soon. Visit partyslate.com to learn more. Again, you really got to check out partyslate.com. Another topic was when she talked about client retention. And there's a lot of people, like I remember especially Brian Raffanelli, talking about legacy, creating legacy clients. He did a whole presentation at Engage on that. And so client retention, creating these legacy clients is really important. And I remember that Meryl was saying, for example, knowing when their birthday is and sending them something. And I would say not necessarily a gift to 50 people, but even just a handwritten card or a notice. I think it really catches people by surprise. And she also mentioned, Valerie, I wonder what you thought of this. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And I'm going to steal this idea. She said that she creates Google alerts about clients. And again, this may not be every client, but maybe your bigger ones, who you think could bring you back for some other event, an anniversary, a birthday, another wedding, whatever. But she creates Google alerts so that when there's a piece of news, she can know about it and contact them, congratulate them, or comment, or even on social media to watch their social media. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I think that is super smart. And I'm so glad that she said that. We don't, I think it works. The Google alerts are great for bigger clientele, like you had mentioned, especially in the corporate space. But going to a personal level, one-on-one on social media, staying connected with clients well after their event to see what is happening in their lives and just staying connected, even, not necessarily just when something happens, like a milestone, an anniversary or something comes around, but just the people share so much these days on stories on Instagram. And then, of course, the static posts that are always available to look at. But just staying engaged with people really helps that relationship building through their minds, where they're associating you with being a real human being and not just some entity.
That's right. But
like you said, the handwritten note in a day and age where all we do is text and email, and the mail that we receive in the post is bills and other things, and a nice handwritten note, there is no replacement for that. And even something as simple as taking the time to make that mention, dropping it in the mail, is super meaningful to somebody. So easy to do, easy to put into your process, and helps build that rapport.
Yeah. And speaking of notes, like right now in front of me on the edge of my desk, I have 4 different cards. One has a saying, another one is a really cool image. Another one is really elegant, but plain. They're right in front of me so that and my stamps and my address stamp. So yeah, I'm really hot. I'm real big on personal notes. And when I can find out something about someone. And also, another topic that came up, of course, this is a big one for all of us, is pricing. And yes. And I know that you Valerie, you've got this great program actually about pricing. You have a pricing for profit webinar, and later I'm going to ask you more details about that. But it is a big topic, and I loved how she said, and this is us taking responsibility. She said the reason that we usually the reason we don't get the business is rarely based on price, but rather, and this is it, because we didn't show the client effectively enough why we're different.
Yes. I find this probably to be the most fascinating thing she said in the entire podcast, because it took me a little bit by surprise. I've never quite thought of it that way. And of course, when I teach and I'm talking to planners and designers about charging what they're worth and sharing their value and all of that, a lot of objections and questions come to me from people in the industry that, well, what happens when somebody comes behind me and charges $200 less? And the client says, well, I went with that person because they were cheaper. I think the valuable point of what she was making in saying this statement is when your pricing is so close to your competitors, and a client says, well, we chose this person because they were less expensive. It's not really because they went with the cheaper person per se. It's because you didn't buttress your value in the mind of that potential client. They didn't see why you were worth $200 more, as a DJ or whatever. They just saw it came down to numbers because whatever your pitch was similar enough to the other guy that the client sees it as relatively equal. So all things being equal, then they will choose the less expensive one. And I've really struggled with this in business. And I think perhaps a lot of people do, where you do make a price shift in your services or your product and you jump up because you want to make more money and you're trying to charge enough. And it's really scary to do that, especially when the rest of your market and competitors aren't doing that. And one of the objections I get in my market, which is not necessarily luxury, I consider it to be lovely, which is a whole other probably discussion. But I'm priced leaps and bounds above everyone else that my clients, potential clients, are also interviewing. So I'll often get questioned on, well, why are you so much more than the next highest person by like arms and legs ahead? And the difference to me, I think, is what it is that we do. We only do 4 weddings a year. We only focus really on the clients that we really want to work with and that really, really want to work with us. We're not interested in looky-loos and people that are just trying to chase, something inauthentic. And I think that goes hand in hand with the storytelling, as you discussed earlier. The storytelling and sharing the value of what it is that you do is so much more meaningful in closing that sales process out than just say, oh, well, they just booked on price. It shouldn't be about price. It should be about what it is that we're really engaging with these potential clients on, and do they engage back with us? Yes. And I add to that, and this is, Meryl said this, is that it's got to evoke an emotion. So, talking about features and benefits, she gave an example that it's not stuff like we have the best customer service, but rather something that, again, evokes an emotion. And her example with that one was something like, our service is so amazing, it means your friends won't wait in line at the bar for a drink. Right. Something really specifically that grabs them. Another thing she said was, or your flowers are going to be so stunning, it means your Instagram and Pinterest are going to be on fire. Like if she knows that's important to someone. And that really, like even as I say it to you, Valerie, I'm feeling an emotion, and that also made me think, because sometimes I get stuck in just kind of listing out, but I like how, again, it's kind of tying it in a sense to storytelling and doing it so that it evokes emotion, because it's all about connecting with the client. Right. It is. And I think the more tangible you make that service to the client, what it is that they value, understanding what's important to them, and then playing that back to them really does, like I said, it builds that trust factor that's so important to get somebody to buy into what we do, that you really understand what it is they're going for beyond just, okay, we want an event, we want flowers, we want music, we want drinks. We want this to be the end experience for our guests to come away with X, Y, and Z. And the fact that you got that without me having to say that means I'm going to invest in you no matter what it takes. That's what you want to evoke with that emotional response. And I think it's super effective. Yeah, I love that point. And well, that is all that we have time for today. I want to thank everyone for listening, and be sure to check out Valerie's site, which is sapphireevents.com. That's SAPPHIRE events.com. Of course, we will have links in the show notes, so you can go to theweddingbiz.com or scroll down on your app on your phone and you'll see Valerie's link. Also, Valerie's social media handle is also Sapphire Events. And Valerie, just for a moment, if you could say something about the Pricing for Profit webinar that you offer. Sure. Thanks, Sandy. I have a webinar available to creatives of all kinds in the wedding and event space, but most specifically to wedding planners and designers to learn about not just how to charge, but exactly what it is that I charge, and discussion of contracts and how to go through the sales process, and then how to go through the design process to buttress the value. It's really very comprehensive and informative, and that's available too. And we'll make sure you have a link in the show notes too for that.
Yeah, great. Also, the website of our guest, Meryl Snow, it is merylsnow.com, merylsnow.com. Her Facebook media handle is Snow Consultant, and her personal one is meryl.snow, and her Instagram handle is at Meryl Snow. Again, all of this is in the show notes. Meryl has incredible array of services. You all should check out her site. It's really something else. I told her in the interview, I learned something just by reading through her website. There was so much there. It actually made me think about how I do my business in some ways. And, of course, our website is theweddingbiz.com, and you can follow us on Instagram in particular at theweddingbiz. Please share this with your friends and colleagues so people can find us. We appreciate that. And once again, we want to thank our sponsor, which is Party Slate. You can find out more information about Party Slate at partyslate.com. So thanks again to listening to The Wedding Biz.